I read Sasaki and Peeps. Is it worth your time? Join me and find out.
That man and his manga.
Hello and welcome to That Man. That is my merchandise, and today we are looking at another light novel. Now, this is a light novel that was sent to me for a fair and honest review from Yen Press, and that is Sasaki and Peeps. I hope I pronounced that right. Now, this one is actually getting an anime, and to be honest, as soon as I saw the cover for this, I was pretty enthralled. I was really excited to try this one out, and if I'm honest, it was absolutely worth the time and investment. Now, this is one that I don't think I've really heard anybody talking about. I did mention on Reddit after I read it that I had read it, but a lot of people were quite mixed with it. Honestly, personally, I loved it.
Tired and unfulfilled by his dead-end job, Sasaki decides to adopt Peeps, an adorable pet Java sparrow. Peeps, however, is really Piccolo, a powerful sage from another world. After Peeps bestows Sasaki with magic and the ability to cross worlds, the two decide to export household items for profit in pursuit of a leisurely lifestyle. But when Sasaki's new magic gets him mixed up with a whole other kind of supernatural struggle back in Japan, will it destroy his chances at realising the relaxing life of his dreams?
Sasaki and Peeps follows the adventures of an adult businessman who is pretty much fed up with life and decides that he wants to have a companion, which ends up being this little bird. He goes to buy the bird and all of a sudden, pick me, the bird starts talking. And it turns out that this bird named Peeps is basically a reincarnation from another world, and that is just the start of everything. Now, this is a series that manages to blend a lot of things together. We have an adult male character, which honestly is very different in terms of a protagonist. Most of the time when we have these protagonists, they're usually these teenagers or very young adults. Don't really see a 40-something-year-old as a kind of main character. But you know what? It really does work. It really does play to the strength of this one. And this is actually unlike pretty much anything I have ever read before. Now, I say read because it is very similar to another series that I actually watched a few years ago. And it was a title that I really enjoyed. But I kind of feel like a lot of the world kind of forgot about it, and that title was called Recreators. Now, Recreators is about a series where a lot of genres came to our world. So, for example, we had the military girl, and we had the boy with a mech, and we had like fighting characters and the harem characters all kind of come to the real world and have to save the world and join forces and fight each other. It was very over the top, and Sasaki and Peeps really does remind me of that because it also manages to merge so many different things. So I have read Volume 1 and I pretty much instantly bought Volume 2. I read Volume 2 yesterday and I actually went out and bought Volume 3, which should be coming today. So yes, this is a little bit of a few Volume 1s in terms of review. So this kind of starts off, he goes to the other world, and yeah, it's just like, you know, the usual thing of, yeah, a little bit of shenanigans in the other world. He decides to they're going to start cheating the system. They start bringing stuff from his world to the other world to sell, because of course the other world hasn't seen calculators or what have you, and yeah, he starts making quite a bit of money. Things start getting interesting when, well, psychics start getting involved, and then magical girls, and then death games, and yes, more and more things start getting added onto the whole pile. So it's rather well done. I really think it is really well done when it comes to the way it's done, because it's kind of like it follows two characters. It follows the main character Sasaki, and he's the one who ends up getting involved with everything. So he's kind of like, oh yeah, I I'm just sick of life, and then just like everything starts happening. It's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna have a nice relaxing retirement after making all of this money. Then the psychics get involved, and then the magical girls get involved, and it just keeps piling and piling and piling things on. But it works. Everything is given enough time to shine, and it doesn't feel too jammed in. It feels very well thought out in terms of that aspect. So, the characters. I'm going to mention, well, I'm not going to mention too many characters. We've got Sasaki, who, as I mentioned, is middle-aged. He's kind of sick of his life. He thinks things through like an adult, as to be expected. And obviously he's worked in a dead-end job for God knows how long. He's kind of realised that he's probably going to die at an early age. He's overworked, he's constantly stressed, and then he decides to have a companion, which turns out to be an otherworld bird. And yeah, at the end of the day, I quite like the way that it's kind of portrayed with Sasaki. At the end of the day, he's kind of like, he's pretty down to earth. He thinks things through like as an adult. He thinks kind of just like, oh well, you know, this is kind of what would happen in the real world if I did this. And it's kind of unique because I feel like a lot of these light novels are kind of, because it's a young character, they kind of get away with doing pretty much whatever they want with very little consequences, or if the consequences do happen, it does tend to be a kind of a huge kind of thing-changing part of things. It does feel like it's a lot different having a character who's very down to earth from the beginning, very more wiser in his ways. I like the fact that it pretty much sets the thing that straight away he's kind of just like, oh, you know what, I'm not actually interested in girls because I got an STD off a stripper at one point, and I was just kind of like, okay, yeah, that's fine. Because of that, it kind of sets up things a little bit more, because there is, yeah, I mean, it kind of, because he turns around and says that, and that is reinforced many, many times, it kind of means that you're not going to be expecting a relationship between him and any of the other female characters, because there are a lot of female characters. The most important one is the next door neighbour. Now, the next door neighbour is a tragic character. She is pretty much abused by her family, well, her mom. Her mom doesn't take care of her. She often is sat outside, locked outside, and she relies on Sasaki a lot, more than he realises, and she's kind of starts developing feelings for him. Of course, he's the only one who's actually kind of shown her any kind of respect or kind of like pity or anything like that, and her mind starts to get a little bit corrupted in that way, because yeah, it's very uncomfortable to read. So because we kind of have the whole thing with Sasaki like, oh, I'm not interested in women because I had a bad thing, it kind of just like, oh, you kind of know it's not going to happen, but the character itself is very tragic and you just want the best for her, and unfortunately worse and worse things as the series seems to progress seems to happen to her. Other characters, well, we have a lot of tropes. So we have, for example, psychics, who obviously have their certain psychic abilities. They only seem to have one specific ability, whereas Sasaki, who has learned magic from Peeps, he has all kinds of abilities and he's trying to hide from them. It turns out that the character who Sasaki is paired with in terms of his, like, when they're doing all of these missions, turns out to be another high school girl. The character they're fighting turns out to be a psychic who is a 100-year-old lolly, and of course they are in a fight against magic girls, who turns to be another very young girl. So as you can imagine, this adult character is surrounded by a lot of very young girls, or old girls, old characters who look very young, and yeah, that's kind of what I wasn't too keen with. But the positive thing is that every single character does genuinely feel like they're the own thing. There are a lot of characters who are introduced, but they are all given enough time to breathe and are built up. It's very well done in that aspect. I really enjoyed the fact that they do take the time to make sure that each of these characters are their own thing, and they are all doing their own thing in each of the worlds. So one of the things that I always tend to find with a lot of titles is that, well, once you kind of focus on one character and it's kind of like, oh, well, this protagonist is going to go out and meet this character, and that character is going to follow the protagonist around for the rest of the whole thing, and their life is now attached to the protagonist. In Sasaki and Peeps, however, it feels like each of the characters are all doing their own thing, and then either dragged in and kind of put on top of, like, he gets windows into what they're doing. It works so much better. It feels like this is a genuine, real kind of world aspect. Now, what do I like about this series? Now, I've obviously talked about this one for quite some length so far, so I'm going to try and keep this one short. The characters, like I said, they're all their own thing. The world is well defined enough. I mean, of course, it's just a real world thing, but, you know, I kind of feel like even the other world is defined enough. You get enough information that you need from there. You get a motivation for what the psychics are doing. You get motivation for what the magical girls are doing. You get motivation for each of the characters. And once they start adding more and more things in, it just works. Now, one of the things that I do want to talk about at this point is that it does mesh all of the other things rather well. So the main kind of thing we kind of have is we tend to have a chapter of Sasaki doing something in the normal world, usually with the psychics or fighting the magical girls or trying to help the magical girls. And then on the other hand, we have Sasaki going to do stuff in the other world where he's got his fingers in pies, he's got businesses, he's got trading things, and that's kept rather separate until about halfway through volume 2, when it kind of just, yeah, they start to merge stuff together, and yeah, it's kind of starting to look like things from both worlds are going to start coming together. There is quite a lot of action in here, and the action is done rather well. Each character has, for example, they have their own magic thing, and it's done quite well. Sasaki is a bit of an overpowered character because he has Peeps, who obviously has all of these abilities and stuff like that. But it works. It never feels like everything's too out of depth. Sasaki is a calculating individual. He has a little bit more sense than other characters, but it doesn't feel too kind of ridiculous that he knows everything. He's still only human, and he's very down to earth. He thinks of stuff like, oh, well, you know what, I could take pity on this next door neighbour, but, you know, he's like, oh, I could invite her in, she looks cold, and then he's just like, but that could be down as kidnapping, or it looked rather weird to have an adult man inviting a young girl into a house. No, I'm not going to do that. A lot of things sounds rather cruel. A lot of things kind of, if it was any other series, you'd just be like, oh, come in here, you can be like the protagonist side character, you know. But it feels rather cruel, and it feels more down to earth in that aspect. What did I not like about this? Well, sometimes the chapters do tend to drag. I do tend to find a lot of stuff in the other world starts to drag a little bit, but it's never boring. The only thing that I kind of didn't really like was the amount of lolly characters, and I mean the author is called Bunko Lolly, so it's kind of like, yeah, you know, there's quite a lot of lolly characters. There's not actually any adult female characters in there, apart from one who is a horrible person. But yeah, it's kind of not really that much of a bad thing. Like I said, because we have the whole thing, I'm not interested in girls because I've had a horrible experience. We know that there's not going to be any kind of relationship going on between an adult character and a young character, which pretty much negates pretty much everything else. At the end of the day, a lot of the whole kind of young characters kind of complements having an adult character. Sasaki, an adult character, is sick of his life, he's bored, he's got a dead-end job, whereas a lot of the young characters are very much kind of, I can't wait to grow up because I can do this, or a young girl pretending to be an adult so she can work in a particular job. And we've got a lot of that contrast where it's kind of the whole thing where when you're a kid you kind of think all the adults have got things figured out and the adults are kind of like gonna have a good time, whereas the adults are just sick of their life. And it kind of works. It kind of works. Like I said, the overworld stuff sometimes get a little bit boring, but overall, I didn't really find too many things that I wasn't too happy with. I think the biggest issue, and this is one of the things I found with the Reddit when people said they didn't like it, they said, oh well, I didn't like the fact that every other character was a young girl, and it was like, oh, I didn't like the fact that it's like, he's pretty much got a harem of young girls, and I was like, but he's not interested in young girls, so it's not a harem. I just feel like a lot of things people kind of misunderstood from the series. Sasaki and Peeps is probably one of, if not the best light novel I have started this year. It's very fresh, it feels completely unique compared to pretty much every isekai that we always see. Having a main character that is middle-aged, kind of sick of his life, and just keep getting all of these more and more things piled on just works. Pretty much everything about this series absolutely works. Now, I am a little bit cautious as to if you start developing any feelings to any of the other characters. Yeah, that's going to be a little bit uncomfortable, and I'd probably drop it at straight away if that does happen. But on a whole, the series is pretty fine. The characters are likeable enough, the characters are not likeable enough. Villains feel like genuine villains rather than just kind of like, oh, well, he was misguided. And yeah, it really does manage to pull everything out. Now, I kind of feel like I've talked about this series for quite some time, but I really genuinely feel I have only kind of skirted over the tip of the iceberg. I would 100% recommend checking this series out if you want a different light novel. It is 100% worth your time, and it's all the more better for that. Thank you for coming, and thanks again for staying. Did you enjoy Sasaki and Peeps? Let me know in the comments. Go check it out. You won't be disappointed. And I'll see you in the next chapter.